All right, so let's start our second cycle. For the record, this is now the part B of our class that is named Book of Genesis and the Seven Commandments. So in our first cycle of classes, we covered the 10 generations between Adam and Noah. Okay. Now we are moving to 10 generations between Noah and Abraham. So in our first cycle of classes, the importance, let me pause here and note the importance of those classes, I think, more than anything else, is, people are aware of ideas and of the Bible and so on, but the classes help you to frame your thinking in order. If somebody asks you, where is suicide in the Bible? Or you say, I know, it's a Noah rainbow covenant, or the seven sort of bloodshed laws. The first one is suicide. So frame your thinking, you know where to look for, you know where it is in the Bible. If somebody asks you, is it okay to disconnect the breathing machine or not? You say, Noah talk about something like this in number 6 of his rainbow covenant law. If somebody asks you, well, what is marriage? And who tell you that Noah should marry or not? Does marriage apply to Noah? Who are the people that Noah should marry or not? Now you know the answer. The answer is given in the story of Eden. As immediately as Eve is born, is made form in Eden, God introduces idolatry and adultery and specify exactly whom you should marry, whom should not. So idolatry, likewise, is a sign. What about the posture of Noahide to science? Is science forbidden or not? What is science? So the answer is, I know. I learned in chapter 1 that God made us look at wisdom in the world and put it in our brain as a gift, which we should cherish and use it for our benefit. Science is excellent things, but let's not make science as an idol. So the answer is framed within idolatry. In short, you are now smarter than other people who just need to bow and express some faith in God. That's enough to be saved. Fine, nothing wrong with that, but there is nothing above it. You are lost. You don't know what exactly the Bible is saying, what you should do. It's not enough just to believe in God, but to know what God is asking you to do and to know where it comes from. In short, I'm telling you, that's what the Talmud is all about. This is exactly what the entire Talmud is all about. And the Talmud always starts with the law, the 613 law. So the law says, the Mishnah and the law says this and this is it. Now the Talmud always the first question is, well, where is it? Who tell me, is it true? Who told you that this should be done or not? Then there are different, you'll be surprised, there are different answers, and there's debate. from this verse on that verse, and so forth. So that's the entire Talmud, is to, after you finish the entire Talmud learning, actually a person become knowledgeable in Talmud if thinking is in order. It's like a strong building that on the ground that nobody can shake. If you know the Talmud, nobody can shake your faith, because it's very solid. You know exactly what God wanted you, and you believe, and you understand the wisdom. The same is true what we are doing now in our using learning the 7 commandments of Noah out of the book of Genesis. So after we finish our courses through the book, you know, okay, he talk about bloodshed, he talk about theft, he talk about civil order. Oh, I know where it comes from. I know what he tell me, because usually when the Torah present a law like bloodshed, it presented in a biblical magnitude. So bloodshed is rainbow covenant. In order to understand, it's not just a law, do not kill, because it's not good for the society. Do not kill because it's against it's a kind of cruelty in your heart. It's offensive against merciful one. It can brought upon us the flood, and so on. So again, it comes as a package. You see the segment where the Torah speak about it. The entire segment around it give you the notion idolatry. Idolatry is not just a foolish thing that in the past, you know, people bow to spirit, and it's superstition. It's not idolatry. Idolatry is wow. Idolatry. If idolatry entail knowing who is God. You don't need just to worship idols. You need to know whom you should worship. Who is God? You know, so it comes in detail. Suddenly you learn that the idols are within you. Your desire that God gave you as a present, enrich your life and make us Homo sapiens smart and artistic creatures and so on. That's also the nucleus of idolatry. It's part of our idolatry trial. So suddenly, what I'm saying, idolatry is coming with the whole package. Now you learn that Adam is actually born with this tendency to be drawn and be fascinated by things so much that he can actually worship in it. So framing, putting things in order in your mind. The same thing is now, as we move from the first series of class, from adultery, and bloodshed. Now we move to number 4 is theft. And all the stories from Noah and Abraham, from Noah to Abraham, are revolving around number 4, theft, as you will see. So again, let me repeat in kind of what I've just said. So as we go back to, as we started our classes, in Genesis chapter 1, we learn about the creation of the world, creation of Adam, and we learn about the notion of sin in the story of Eden, in chapter 2-3. Then we learn about Noah generation, their sin, how they split the attribute, they finally committed a lot of bloodshed and theft, and brought upon them the flood and rainbow covenant. That's what we learned last class. Now in the second part of our classes, we will cover the next 10 generations, a long period between Noah and Abraham. Of course, we are not going to study every detail, but in bird view, enough to understand what we are talking, what the Torah wants from us. So we're going to learn about the 10th generation between Noah and Abraham. And we will also, our goal is to, in fact, our goal is to learn what was special about Abraham, why Abraham so important. Turn out it's not that he was just believing God. Noah also believed in God. Adam believed in God. So what was special about Abraham in his faith? And what is circumcision? What is circumcision all about suddenly? All right, so that's our goal to reach, and you cannot comprehend it without walking from all the generation, from Noah to Abraham, 10 generations. The Torah presents them in order to explain what the circumcision and Noah, Abraham is all about. Remember that Abraham was not a Jew, as people think. Abraham, according to the Rambam, Abraham, the same is true with Isaac and Jacob, they were Noahide. They were not different from other children of Noahide, but maybe special because they took upon themselves whatever order, if you wish. Each one of them added another commandment on top of the 7. Abraham got 8, Jacob got 9. So the question is why? What's all about? Why did God had to add 2 more about on top of Noah 7? And why should we learn about them? Because we should learn about them because they are also Noahide. Joseph was Noahide in Egypt when he ruled Egypt. He was a Noahide. He wanted them to keep the 7th commandment, including circumcision, as we will learn. So that's why the entire book of Genesis is based on the 7th commandment. And as we walk through it, we learn about the commandment one by one. The nation of Israel is also only a special kind of Noahide that actually where Moses introduced the Israel as a nation, as a special kind of Noahide, only on Sinai, very late, only the book of Exodus. Before that, even the Israelites in Sinai, in Egypt, in fact, they were Noahides. It's amazing. We celebrate Passover, but they were Noahide. And the question is, should Noahide also celebrate Passover the same way? We'll talk about it. Conceptually, until Sinai, everything was Noahide. So again, if you walk to remind ourselves, in chapter 1, Adam is born to withstand the challenge of idolatry. God spoke in plural. I just recall what we learned from last classes. So idolatry, number 1 of Noahide, was introduced in chapter 1. Then through the chapter 2, from 2 to 4, in Story of Eden, Adam and his wife were formed to withstand, beside idolatry, also adultery. Immediately as Eve was born, he said, therefore a man should leave his father and his mother, cleave to his wife, and they become one. We become one flesh. So Eden is a source of idolatry commandment and marriage. And then after chapter 4 to 10 of the story, from Eden to the flood, the story starts with Cain and Abel, the first murder, and then the entire package of stories. We didn't go one by one, but we spoke about kind of bird view. But if you go in detail, actually all the stories there are about bloodshed and theft, which together called Hamas. And so that's number 3 of Noahide commandment. And finally culminated in the Rainbow Covenant, that the entire Rainbow Covenant is just about bloodshed law. So nobody can say, "Oh no, I don't believe in it. I don't believe in 7 commandments." Yeah, well, I believe in the Bible, but I don't see the 7 commandment. Of course, you don't know how to read it. The Bible itself, to walk around from idolatry in chapter 1, adultery in Soul of Eden, and bloodshed rainbow. The whole Rainbow Covenant is just about, not about philosophy, not about God and angels and who knows what, about simple mundane thing, killing, murder. That's what the Rainbow Covenant is all about. So now we are about to enter the new field as we move now to the 10th generation that separate Noah from Abraham. And amazingly, the story is so important. The Torah the Torah the Torah dedicate so much space, so much stories from Abraham until from Noah until the circumcision. So many stories, and all of them evolve around number 4, 5th, as we will see. Again, it's not just about philosophy and new God and a new religion, and no, it's not about Noah, number 4. It's so important. But you ask me 5th. Now 5th, well, I know you just told me that in Noah time, people committed theft and murder, and that's why the flood came. That called Hamas. So the theft was committed also in the generation of Noah. There were evil people committing theft. So why suddenly we talk about Abraham, the generation after Noah, with theft? Oh, there is a difference. To remind you, the theft that was done in Noah time, we did go into in detail, but we mentioned it, were committed on the individual level, on the street, by gangs, two-kind infamous gangs that committed, they robbed people on the street, they stole, they raped, but on individual. There was no armies. There were bands, gangs, headed by Tubal Cain, which was Noah's brother-in-law. He invented new metal. He became very strong, kind of military strong. Nobody could win a battle with this gang. And they roamed the streets and they did whatever they wanted. They're called children of Elohim, and the Torah said that they took women as they wished. And they robbed and stole, not only women, but the other things too, as they wished. But it was done on individual level. They could break into a person's home, ransack it, rape his wife, but it was individual. Whereas from Abraham onwards, we are talking about a new level of nations, invading nations, of empires. So here we are talking about a level of theft of territories and slaves, people abducted to work as slave for the rest of their life to enrich the owner in a large scale that was never seen in Noah's time. So that's what bothered Abraham. Abraham was born into society which is ruled by large empire, nations, empire, alliances that roam around the territories and subdue people to pay taxes. There's a 4 nations of the north coming to fight the 5 nations in the south there, and so forth. Indeed, in the year 2500 BC, as the scholar said, this is the first empires that came out both in Mesopotamia and in Egypt. Each one of them, followed by Assyrian and Babylonian, that they had no problem in invading other nations, subduing them, asked for taxes with armies and enslaved them, became rich and powerful. That was not seen in Adam in the time of Noah. And that kind of theft in large scale, that's what they are talking about now. Again, if I sum up, there is a increasing level before we dive into Noah, into the generation after the flood. One more point. Idolatry, number one, is a prohibition or commandment, if you want. It's a sin that can be done by individual. Adam himself, as he was born even in Eden, even before the woman. If he had violated the God's law and ate from the fruit without a woman by his side, he would have violated idolatry. So idolatry is individual. It can be done also by on a larger scale, but idolatry by itself has a meaning even for the individual. Whereas number two, if you think about it, number two, adultery, now you need two parties for the tango. You need the couple or married couple, not only a married couple, but now you need a third party that will commit the adultery. In Eden, it was serpent. On earth, it's the third party. So we climb up from individual to the couple or to a small community. Now, this is so climbing up from idolatry, first chapter, to adultery, second chapter, climbing up in the level of people involved. Now, bloodshed, as we move up, was done by a family now, children, more than just a couple, like in Eden. Now we even as small as 2 brothers can commit bloodshed. How much more so 2 villages side by side. So we're moving up in the scale. And now, of course, as we just said, theft including abduction, is done first individual on a large scale in Noah's time, but in a huge scale, in a unproportionately large scale in Abraham's time. So we move up, as we move up in developing evolution of human society, from a family to a tribe to a nation, the meaning of those commandments become more applicable, and also the meaning is changing. bloodshed is not just like two brothers, but Auschwitz. You can kill today millions of people in hundreds of thousands away. You can bomb Hiroshima and kill 150,000 people in one day. So bloodshed, as we move on in history, things get the different proportion, also different meaning. We need to remember that. So as we evolve, the meaning of the commandment evolve. And as our knowledge evolve, idolatry, to me, or to us, is more than a person who lived in the 13th century. They had no clue what creation is. We know what creation is. We know what makes us different from animal. We understand when Torah says that we have something in our heart that animals don't have. We have a room for the merciful one. No, but we understand it. We understand how man can evolve through this billion of years. And the meaning of idolatry is changing beside others. So let's move now on to the story itself. Now, so we start by last time Noah agreed to start procreate, start to bring civilization again. At first he refused. He thought, oh God, I'm sure that my children one day split to two different camps, like in our generation. It's in our blood, in our genes. One will worship Allah, the other one will worship mercy, and nobody will worship oneness. And by violating oneness, they will slide again into all the other commandments, violating all the other, and they will end up with again bloodshed, and worse than now, as in my time, Noah thought, which is we see today. But Hashem promised him that he will be more patient, and that one day will human may climb up and be able to overcome those drive to be drawn to one attribute or to another. Only then Noah agreed to procreate, and here we are. So let's read. I think it's, if you have a Bible, you can open it, Genesis 9, verse 18. I strongly recommend it. I don't have slide to show you, so that's why we need the Bible open. Genesis chapter 9. And it said, let's read the introduction there. After the flood, okay, and the children of Noah, or the son of Noah, that went out of the ark were two dots, Shem and Ham and Yefet. And Ham was the father of Canaan. Very important note, as we're going to see now. These were the three sons of Noah. And of them was the whole world, or the whole earth, overspread. Wow. In just few words, the Torah described the new reality. It continued to finish it. It presents now the 70 nations that were formed. And then in the chapter 11:1, it summarizes or says the whole earth was one language and a common purpose. So after the rainbow covenant, Noah agreed to procreate, as I said, and his children began to settle the earth and rebuild civilization. They spread all over, like in the Wild West, in America. They grabbed territories. Each one established his own farm. Each group is own farm. Each country in time is own farm, own border. But they had, the Torah described it, they had one language and one purpose. And they had one faith. They all abided by the 7 commandments of Noah. They were very close to the flood. They had one faith, the true faith, one language, probably the Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, the holy language, and there was peace, and a common purpose. They all wish to achieve the American dream, prosperity and peace. They spread all over the earth, grabbing territories and possessing them. How did they possess? By cultivating. You possess the land by plowing, by putting a border around it. That's how it was in Wild West, and this is how they did before. So whoever came first took his land as much as he could. So here the notion that you acquisition, you become an owner of territory by cultivating it. Now, when the crop grows, you become the owner of that crop because you made it. And this is tell you the story of what fascinated that generation, like more than anything else. They were fascinating. They were fascinated by the idea of ownership, producing, becoming wealthier. And the Midrash says basically that the most revered profession at that time was a trader who went from farm to farm, exchange, and so that's how spread the international, if you wish, or inter-farm, and a larger or smaller scale trader. A trader is called in Hebrew Knaan. Amazing. And that's why Ham's son was Knaan. Knaan is a trader in Hebrew, and Knaan, he was so smart, he was a great trader. And the Midrash also say he was a poet. He was a fascinating guy, this child of grandson of Noah, the Knaan, who the father of the Canaanite nation. He was a great poet in Hebrew. Noah loved him. There are many stories about it. We're going to skip now. So this is a face of earth, the first generation. Peace, tranquility, speaking one language. Each one recognizes border. There is a famous treaty of Noahide nations that Rashi referred several times during the Torah. Treaty of Noahide nation will come to it many times, several times. So those nations recognize each other's border, and they pledge not to invade it, and they honor it. Peace on earth, one language, one faith, the dream of the United Nations come true. Wow, we only dream that this will happen one day. And this has really happened already. So the question is how come from such a ideal condition humanity degraded? Oh, that's the story of Babylon, of the Tower of Babylon will tell you that, how it happened. But this is how it started. Ideal 70 nations. Not only the Midrash will come to it, the Midrash also add that not only so peaceful they were and so beloved that the angel, so to speak, the angel in heaven formed 70, a choir of 70 angels that they chant every morning, holy, holy, holy. You'll come to that. Hashem, the whole earth is full of His glory. Holy, holy, holy. The whole earth is full of glory. They chant it every morning, and the sun rises up, and the sun rotates through the earth. Each nation wake up, group of nations wake up, and their angels sing in harmony. Holy, 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 holy. And through the day, we'll come to that fascinating choir as you learn more about Noahide nations and a way to pray. So here we are, peace, tranquility, even angelic choir in heaven that sing Hallelujah, Hallelujah, as introduced by David later. But holy, 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 Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah speak about it. And our prayer refer to it in great, great way. We speak about it. So now it's it's an ideal situation, but as you might expect, human heart has a lot of fault. And here comes the story of the opposite. As holy, holy, the angels sing holy, holy in heaven, somebody on earth desecrate God's name. And who is that? Surprise, Noah. Noah is falling down. He is the one that the Torah attribute desecration of the first person the second one. The first one was Enosh, his mentor years ago. And now by his preaching, Enosh loved or preferred Yud-Heh-Vav-Keh over Elohim. Remember that he was full of passion to mercy, but he desecrated God's name by separating the attribute. And now Noah, as we're going to see, desecrate God's name by his misbehavior. When a holy person falls down so much that he misbehave in a bad way, that's called desecration of God's name. And that was the story of Noah. So at the same time, the holiness and peace is in heaven. At the same time, there is somebody who desecrates God's name. So let's see what happened to Noah. You know the story, but let's repeat it. I'll read it for you. And Noah, it says, Noah, the man of the ground, there are 7 steps. He is degrading, he's falling down from his high posture. And the Torah describes it in 7 steps. Step number 1, and Noah is called the man of the ground, began. That's number 2. It doesn't say began what? Began. Number 3, and he planted the vineyard. That's number 3. And he was drunk. He drank of the wine. That's number 4. And he was drunk. Number 5. And he rolled over naked on the ground. That's number 6. Within her tent. So whose tent? I'll make it short. Noah obviously have a breakdown. First of all, he started very, very good. And Noah is called the man of the ground. That's a good name that tells us He was a proud owner of a ground, farmer. He is the one who was the first to introduce metal plow, make the life of the farmer easier. Noach means easier in Hebrew. Why is called Noach? His original name was different because he introduced metal plow. He took the weapons of Tubal-Cain, his brother-in-law, melted it, the spears and the sword, and he melted them and made metal plow. So what Isaiah saw in the future, that all the nation one day will make their weapon and make plow of them. But he was referring actually to Noach in the past. So that's one explanation. Noach is a man of the ground. There was another explanation. He's called man of the ground because he's such a good farmer and he planted a vineyard. So man of the ground, a proud owner of the ground. By planting vineyard, making wine, he became famous. So he owned it. He's a man of the ground. Ownership of the ground, ownership of the produce he make. So it's starting very well. But then he drank. He drank maybe, and he say he actually was haunted by the memories of the flood. I believe that. He was so badly haunted that he was badly drunk, rolled over naked on the ground, so drunk, unconscious probably, within her tent. Her tent is his wife's tent. So he couldn't perform. Instead of, he was so drunk, he could perform in marriage relationship. And he was gone and on the ground, and probably his wife left the scene, but he was on the ground, naked. Let's begin. Now we understand what it began. Began means, in Hebrew it's called uchal. Rabbi read it, desecrating. So now uchal is desecrate chulin. He desecrated God's name by his misbehavior. Imagine Noach, the same person who was stood on Mount Moriah and argued with God and influenced God to change his ways. Now he's on the ground naked, his face on the ground. That's not how a holy man should behave. Desecration also always been by some. He desecrates name in other people's eyes. So the Torah says, and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and he told this to his two brothers outside. So the Torah doesn't, from later on, when Noach stood up, he cursed Canaan, not Ham. So the rabbi said, no, it was Canaan who saw first Noach on the ground. So the grandson, who Noach loved so much, this poet, sensitive poet, came and saw his grandfather naked out on the ground, and he did nothing. He just laughed. Some say even made a sodomite act with his grandfather. Okay, Sodom came from Noach, and sodomite act could be. But anyhow, he did something bad. Just ignoring his father is bad. How much more so committing sexual acts with his grandfather on the ground? And he did nothing. But Ham, his father, when he entered, he saw that. Wow, he ran out alarmed. He called his brother Yefet, and they took a garment and they put it on their shoulder and they walked backward and they cover the Noach body nakedness without seeing it. That's it. What is sin? Now, what is the shame of nakedness? Why didn't they want to look at the nakedness? Few words on that. Where nakedness come for, shame of nakedness come for? I want to remind you. First of all, the shame of nakedness, even in the eyes of modern scholars, is an enigma. Since it is not found in animal kingdom, there is no animal with shame of nakedness. Not even chimpanzees that are so close to us. They say that we have only small difference in our DNA, but they are not ashamed of nakedness. So how is it? I heard just yesterday class that the scholar who proudly presented his finding, he said, I don't understand how is it that Homo sapiens, okay, we are just smart apes. Homo sapiens came to possess such a weird feeling of a shame of nakedness that it's not found in any other creature. Well, the scholar was bewildered, but the Torah tells us, we know the story. Torah is telling us how it happened. The Torah said that immediately after eating the forbidden fruit in Eden, to remind you, their eyes opened and they saw their nakedness and were ashamed of it. Prior to the eating of the fruit, Adam and his wife walk around naked like the serpent, and like the serpent, they were unashamed of it, because the beast of the field is never ashamed. So that level before the eating of the fruit, the spiritual level were not different than the serpent. But after the eating, as we already learned, immediately after the eating the food, the first thing that they did, they covered the nakedness. Because having perception of you derogate your heart, that makes you different from Homo sapiens. That makes you different from an ape. We are ashamed of our nakedness as long as we perceive YHVH. And there's no human being that doesn't have that perception in his heart. Because what happened in Eden is our cradle. That's where we are born. So now we know that now when they came in, and those children were righteous sons. They had a strong perception of YHVH in Iran. They kept the 7th commandment. They knew the meaning. And they couldn't even see, they went backward. They couldn't see the father nakedness on the ground. First of all, honoring father and mother. That's part of the 7th commandment. But also not only that, how do you honor it? Not just giving him honor, sitting here, grandpa sit here, grandpa sit here, they want to drink. They don't want to watch, they're afraid to watch their nakedness because of perception of their heart. And they cover the father nakedness. What is the importance of that story? Why is it told? What is the meaning of that? The Talmud says, you know what? And when Noah woke up, he blessed, the famous blessing. First of all, he cursed Canaan, that he would be slave to a slave. We talk about this verse later on. But he also blessed Shem, who was the foremost leader here. And he said, beautify, let Yefet be beautified in the tent of Shem. Let him dwell in the tent of Shem. So the rabbi took it, the tradition took it, that Shem was given the honor, the privilege of wearing a prayer shawl when he stand in prayer before YHVH, like in prayer, because Shem is now the spiritual leader of the family. When he presents the rest of the family in front of Hashem, he should wear a blanket or garment covering from his head two is toe. That's the basic of the talit, prayer shawl. Israel had on top of the talit also fringes that represent the 613 commandment of Sinai. But Noahide who dwell in the Shem tent here should also cover their body with the talit when they stand in prayer. So you ask me, how do we stand in prayer before God? The answer is men and women alike. They should cover their head with this blanket. It can be beautified. It can be colored by seven colors that present the rainbow. But it done in the honor. They have the honor, the story of Noah, and the honor of God, of the covering the nakedness. The story of Eden combined with the story of Noah together. Think about it when you start building your own prayer hall and the way you pray to God. You can pray to God and ask God any time, anywhere, any field. Of course, not naked. But when you come as a service to pray to God as a community together, it's good to wear a talit to cover to remind you who you are. You are the son of Noah, the son of Shem, and you wear the talit as to remind God. We honor our father. We honor your father and mother. We honor Noah and Nama, and we honor God through the honoring of father and mother. And we cover our nakedness because we understand that God of Israel hates nakedness, despises nakedness, despite sexual promiscuity. So I stop here. We need to continue. We talk about how to pray from here. The message is also here. Don't forget the angel of the heaven, angelic angel. From Noahide nation, sing the chant every morning, holy, holy, holy in harmony. Now you have, if combined, you can set up a prayer for your community, which will be so beautiful, so beautiful. Imagine 70 choirs singing holy, holy, holy in harmony, one by one. Each choir represents a family of nations. You can imagine what kind of beautiful scene it is. I stop here. Any question?